a minute. Get going. Cool. Just turned one past, so I will start, and yeah, any latecomers can just join. Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. I'm Ioan Marc Jones, Head of Content at Charity Digital. I'll be the host and presenter for today's session on the future of service delivery. I hope you can all see the screen and everything's working on your end. Please introduce yourselves in the chat box and let us know where you're joining from today. And I'm going to cover a couple of house rules first. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded on to watch on demand at a later date. The slides and other resources will also be available, so don't worry if you've missed anything. Closed captions are available for today's session. To enable these, in the bottom of the Zoom window, click the up arrow, which is next to the closed captions, and then show subtitle, and it should work. And let us know if it doesn't. During the session, please ask questions in the Q&A section you can see there, which I'll try to address at the end, and share any comments, experiences, or advice you have for others in the chat section. A lot of the things I'll be talking about, you'll know much more than me in the sort of weeds, so please do share your comments. And yeah, you can upvote any of the questions in the Q&A section, and I'll get to them first. So if any resonate with you, that would be great. Finally, any sound or image issues, do let us know in the chat, and we'll do our best to get it back to normal as soon as possible. Great. So without further ado, the session will explore some of the core ideas behind our Reimagining Services campaign and look at how we see the service delivery landscape evolving in 2025 and beyond. It will touch on our recently released survey. It came out on Tuesday. It was called Digital Service Delivery in the UK Charity Sector, and explore what our findings mean for the sector and how you might act with them in mind. So to begin, what do we mean by reimagining services? So we run impact campaigns every year. In 2023, we covered the climate action, and we found that Charities actually talked quite a lot about climate change, but actually didn't do too much internally. In 2024, we worked on digital inclusion, which was a great campaign where we worked with so many great charities. And in 2025, we decided to turn our attention to the main reason that charities really exist, their services. We know that services have been under pressure in recent years. The cause of that pressure largely stems from political and economic challenges. We can go back at least to the 2008 recession and the preceding years of austerity, with reductions in public spending increasing a dependence on charities. Then came Brexit and the loss of EU funds. Then the pandemic shattered the economy and lockdowns forced charities to shift ways of working. Then came the ongoing cost of living crisis, putting additional financial pressure on charities. Many charities struggled to meet that demand. Some had to drain their reserves, others had to close. We chose the title Reimagining Services to focus on the positives within these challenging times, to focus on opportunities for the sector. We wanted to help charities to feel more expansive and creative, to help them find new solutions to new and old problems. Reimagining Services also focuses on values as we move forward as a sector, looking at how charities can better uphold standards of ethics and responsibilities for their community. And we speak as a peer. As a charity ourselves, we have our own insights into the challenges and opportunities of the sector. And like many charities, we are kind of learning as we go. And we're hoping that we can share those learnings with everyone else and they can sort of benefit from them. So let's talk about our aims of the campaign briefly. We reflected that although service delivery is a central part of charity work, we have very few conversations about it as a sector. So if you think about the events you attend, it's not often dedicated entirely to service delivery. I think about tech implementation, which we'll touch on later, but that often comes around fundraising and marketing and other areas, not often in service delivery. And if we think about our own content at Charity Digital, our least engaged content is usually service delivery related. We get a lot of clicks around fundraising and a lot of engagement around marketing, less so when it comes to service delivery. But service delivery is at the heart of what charities do. So we wanted to provide more support in that area, even though the impact for us or the engagement for us was likely to be lower. We were trying to increase the engagement so we can increase the conversation as a sector. Our aim was to help charity professionals to unlock new approaches to service delivery, to maximize value for service users, and to support service users across the country. Our approach included exploring how charities use tech in their services, focusing on responsibility and effective use. But complex factors are at play when it comes to service delivery, and we don't pretend that digital is a silver bullet. In fact, we don't pretend digital is a silver bullet in any way across our comms, even though we are charity digital. We're actually a lot more critical than a lot of other charities. But we do want to help people to make the most of digital as one element of maximizing value to service users. So let's dive a little bit into what charity services are in 2025. They are vital. Charities offer many different types of services, some of which address basic human survival needs in a community, such as food banks or shelters. Others help people in emergency situations, while others still look towards our future health by defending the environment. Some charities support the well-being of a particular community, while others advocate for a fairer and more just society. Many charities are essential, with communities relying on them for health, well-being, and a good quality of life. But it's worth noting that often charities reject or resist this idea that their services are essential, seeing it more as plugging a gap created by an often unfair and often unjust system. For example, the Trussell Trust, a famous charity many of you will know, said, "It's not right that anyone needs a food bank. We can change this by ensuring everyone has access or has enough income to cover the essentials." The ultimate goal of the charity sector would be, in theory, the obliteration of the charity sector. No more charities would be an ideal state. In this way, in 2025, charity services are vital, but at the same time, it's okay to acknowledge that they're not the best or they're not always the best long-term solution to a particular problem. Social and systemic change could always be and should always be front of mind, especially when developing services, something that we'll touch upon later. Okay, have a sip of water. So charity services are vital, and in 2025, as mentioned, they are under pressure. What does that pressure look like? They're under pressure from limited funding, restrictions around grant funding, economic and political decisions, and operational demands. And that pressure is felt most acutely inside charities, something you might all know in the work they perform day in, day out. Key challenges include the high demand for services, lack of adequate infrastructure to support missions, feeling that there's no end in sight to certain problems that services address, the psychological impact of supporting others through traumatic and difficult times, facing resistance to change, problems with staff and volunteer recruitment and retention, something we're hearing more and more about, and stress due to high workloads. In a sense, pressure cascades. When we get these pressures from the outside world, in the economy and in political decisions, they manifest often internally in charities, and we feel them. So there's a lot of external factors at play. So despite these challenges, the last few years have demonstrated, as we say over and over again, that charities can achieve a lot with a little. As the sector's work constantly reminds us, it's possible to change the world for the better, bit by bit, with only a few resources. But just because charities have demonstrated resourcefulness and resilience, that does not mean they should continue to be pushed beyond their limits. When charity services in the UK fail to meet demand and are stripped back or forced to close, people and communities suffer. The environment for charity work is shaped by a variety of different people and organisations, ranging from politicians to members of the public, from grant funders to commercial businesses. All have a responsibility to ensure the health of our society, including supporting the work carried out by charities. Charity funds broadly depend on the economy, state spending, public donations, and approaches of grant funders. We know the state spending has been in decline in many years, as we discussed earlier. We know the public, due to financial pressures, have less expendable income. And we've seen that grant funding is presently harder to secure and often more demanding, with, from our perspective at least, based on conversations we're having in the sector, an increase in restricted grants. The commercial sector influences our ability to provide services too. Receptiveness of other sectors to collaborate, bringing in their strengths, perspectives, and connections to the table, help charities boost their services. That might mean workplace volunteering, corporate sponsorship and partnership, pro bono work, support with tech and consultancy, and so on. But beyond these external factors that shape our environment, there is only us, the charities ourselves. And for the rest of the presentation, we'll focus more on what was within our control as charities and as a sector when it comes to delivering the best possible services. And I think to start, we should look at the survey that I mentioned earlier, Digital Service Delivery in the UK Charity Sector. This tells us about the current state of service delivery and how charities are using digital and AI to deliver services and looking a little bit to the future. It covered 5 key areas: the current state of service delivery in 2025, as mentioned, barriers to successful service delivery, on the horizon for service delivery, the importance of co-design and co-delivery, something we really have learned in the course of this campaign, the year-long campaign into Reimagining Services, and the impact of artificial intelligence, because you basically have to discuss that these days. And to start, we'll look at the state of service delivery. So 8 out of 10 charity professionals said that they were personally driven to work by impact, which is obviously a really welcome statistic and one that confirms our suspicions. Charity service delivery is one of the main reasons people actually work in charities, and it is also one of the main reasons people in charities work so hard. That can come with a bit of a caveat because people feel that they need to work harder than people in the private sector just to fulfill the obligations to their community, which can lead to burnout and so on. But it's precisely because they want to deliver impact, precisely because they want to help. But they report to a number of barriers, even devoid of that burnout question, that limit the difference they can make. The barriers in the report shows a lack of confidence or perhaps ability when it comes to delivering digital services. So charity professionals rated their overall service delivery on average at just higher than 7 out of 10. And as you can see there, it's 7.09. But digital service delivery was rated at a lower level, not even reaching 6 out of 10 at 5.83. So charities generally rate their in-person delivery higher than their digital. That's not surprising. It kind of matches what we've learned in the past. And it's not surprising, particularly because of the barriers that were cited in the survey. The main barrier to overall service delivery is the absence of staff or volunteers, or the appropriate amount of staff and volunteers, which was cited by 3/5 of charities, so that's 60%. But importantly, nearly half of respondents directly cited that being unable to use tech efficiently was a barrier to effective service delivery. Now, when it came to digital barriers, the biggest challenge was when it came to that was cost, cited by nearly 3 in 5 people at 56%. This group said they were unable to afford the necessary hardware, software, or the tech infrastructure behind that. Just behind that was having no digital strategy, something that we see mentioned constantly, something we actually saw improve slightly in the Charity Digital Skills Report, I believe, and the struggle to keep up with key developments such as AI and data analysis, with AI being the core one. In all, charities do not have the time, skills, money, or knowledge to pivot. They often feel constricted by those elements. And considering they don't have enough staff and volunteers, which is the highest cited problem, it's no surprise that they struggle or often feel friction when moving towards digital services. In terms of co-design and co-production, the report explored that, unsurprisingly, found that, at least based on our experience over the course of the campaign, just over a third of charities, 34%, work with service users to design and deliver services. And more than a quarter, at 27%, did not work with service users in any way for the delivery of and design of their services. That's a high number, but not a surprising one. It reaffirms an obvious reality, which will be a theme of today's presentation. Not enough charities work with service users. We've advocated throughout the course of the campaign and easy interactions with service users to improve services, particularly around beneficiary feedback mechanisms, or BFMs, which we'll touch on later. And we hope charities in the future are more willing to engage with service users in the design and ideally the delivery of their services. And finally, the report looked at the impact of AI, as I mentioned. So it looked at impact and ethics of AI. We found that 58% of charities are not using AI in service delivery and do not plan to do so in the future. That's huge. That's nearly 3/5 of charities with no plan for AI at any time in their in service delivery. The reason is likely risk, with many charities aware that service delivery involves vulnerable people. In simple terms, charities are using AI, but they're typically using it in areas of low risk. Concerns around data privacy, lack of security, misinformation, introduced bias, and so many other things do prevent charities from using AI in service delivery. Only 3 in 10 said they plan to use AI in the future for service delivery, and only 12% currently use AI for service delivery. That's quite a difference from other areas of charity work. So take the Charity Digital Skills Report in 2025, which found that 76% of charities were using AI in their organizations, a number that rose to 89%, so 9 in 10 charities essentially, when it comes to large charities. So that means that while charities are using AI, they're largely using the tech for other low-risk areas of charity operations. Charities are mainly using it to draft and structure documents and reports, to conduct administrative tasks, and to generate ideas. what's interesting about that is it's almost exactly the same way they were using it 3-4 years ago. The growth in the use of AI is surely growing, but the way people are using it remains more or less the same with obvious differences, but overall it remains largely the same. And perhaps that's welcome in a way. Service delivery does require a greater degree of human oversight than other areas of charity work. And it's kind of welcome that charities are practicing caution in this area. If there was any area to practice caution, it's here. But just to ensure that if it is used correctly and people do work hard to understand the ethics, and if they work hard to mitigate any risks, AI can drastically improve services, which we'll touch on. AI and digital can improve services, which we'll touch on later in the presentation. So with our service findings in mind, we're going to now touch on how you can actually improve service delivery on some of the ways. And we're going to throw a lot out there, and obviously people take whatever's relevant to them. The first is to look at tech. So the pandemic forced charities to go online, and we're still seeing charities using remote and hybrid working models, meaning that in many cases, digital remains absolutely necessary for the running of charities. Digital development is dependent on funding, capacity, and time, and the bigger a charity is, the more digitally advanced it is likely to be. But digital offers different things to different people, depending on size and resources, how advanced your digital infrastructure is, and the type of work your charity does. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. You should tailor digital to your service users' needs. And that brings us to probably the most important theme throughout this presentation: feedback from your service users. So how can you actually get that feedback? How can you work out what your service user needs are? One route is through the beneficiary feedback mechanism of BFM, which we mentioned earlier. This is kind of an umbrella term that allows your users to define your service delivery. You might ask for feedback using digital forms, for example, asking users to evaluate the existing service and give suggestions as to how it could be improved. Now, the most obvious examples here are Google Forms or Microsoft Forms. Google, I don't know if it's called Forms, but Microsoft Forms and Google's alternative. There's loads of free examples there, and you basically fill them in. You send them in a link over email or on a phone, and we'll touch on digital exclusion later, but via phones. And you just ask for iterative feedback. You could do that monthly, maybe quarterly, even yearly, and just gather all that feedback and make decisions based on what you hear from your service users. Other feedback mechanisms include suggestion boxes. You could even have a hotline where people just ring in and give feedback when they need to, or even focus groups for the really in-depth and highly specific forms of feedback. These can be in person, online, or a combination of both. Largely should depend on how your charity users usually interact with your charity. So if you are dealing with people in person, you should try and make the feedback in person. If it is a largely digital service, then obviously digital is a really good way to go. But you should try to combine both qualitative and quantitative feedback to get the most useful results. And that's good advice in all forms of research. There are other more indirect ways of getting feedback, and these can be a bit more creative. So Parkinson's UK give us a great example of using AI to better understand user needs. The charity used AI to track the topics and themes that communities living with Parkinson's were discussing online, using a technique of comparative linguistics. This revealed key concerns among people with Parkinson's, such as keeping fit. In response, the charity started to produce fitness videos and fitness sessions via its YouTube channel and other digital channels led by physiotherapists. This is an example of a charity going out and finding feedback, even if indirectly. But whether you're using AI or not, you should always get feedback that is representative from your diverse range of users. For example, making sure that there are in-person feedback methods available, particularly to those facing digital exclusion. So effective digital services. So you've got your feedback. So how do you now build your effective digital services? A third of charities told the Charity Digital Skills Report that they were poor at or were not using digital skills in service delivery. Only 18% said they would prioritize new digital services in the year to come. That generally corresponds with our findings, the findings in our own report. And a lack of confidence or ambition when it comes to digital services could be due to charity workers lacking the requisite skills or problems with digital funding. If users feel services would be improved by digital based on the feedback you've received, and your charity is able to embrace it, it's probably worth pursuing. And here are some common ways that charities have used digital, which might spark a bit of inspiration. So the top one's the most common one. You can provide information, advice, and other resources on your website, so users can access them remotely and at their own convenience. So obviously that's what Charity Digital do. But what's interesting about that is we're always trying to find new ways, perhaps like learning management platforms have come into, learning management systems have come into play recently. And we always try to find new forms of getting the same information to people. The code of practice now can be accessed through an AI, it can be accessed with an anchored text. And so a lot of the time, it's not just about having a sort of website that contains all this information. It's about finding new digital ways of giving that information to your service users in the most effective way. And to find the most effective way, it's best to ask them. Charities such as community centres may have computers and laptops that their users can access when they attend the centre. For example, if they don't have access at home, those charities are doing a great thing by providing actual tech to people that allows them to access services, perhaps multiplying their impact. Charities can use VR headsets, which are a bit more technical, to help service users see the past, future, and a different version of reality to give them insight into a new situation they might experience. So Great Ormond Street Hospital, I'm sure some people will be familiar with that. I think they did something on the lines of this, where they showed prospective clients or prospective service users what life would be like, and it provided reassurance and helped them on their journey. Charities can offer services like therapy or advice sessions through online video calls or video conferencing. For example, if service users are unable to attend in person, the obvious benefit here is geography. It traverses geographical boundaries, and obviously just reach for general and just comfort as well. A lot of people prefer that form of interaction. Assistive tech of different kinds can help service users attend in-person and online events and communicate more effectively with charity professionals. Charities can use comparative AI, as we saw with the Parkinson's example earlier, to spot patterns and aid decision-making in service delivery, identifying similarities, differences, and relationships between data points, and providing services based on that information. Social media can be used as a platform for charities to reach the public, to advocate for change. And in a similar vein, charities often create and publicize online petitions to support political advocacy. The best use of tech in digital services will depend on the charity, its aims, and its users. And maybe none of these apply, and maybe several of them do. But one of the best ways to do it is to consult with other charities, not necessarily charities that have a similar mission, but maybe a similar size, and maybe they're providing a service for a completely different reason that kind of can relate to something you're trying to achieve. Basically, the advice for us is talk to other charities, collaborate. During our digital inclusion campaign, we collaborated with loads of charities, and they taught us so much that we wouldn't have known. And had we not done that, we wouldn't have been able to be as effective ourselves. And finally, it's a bit of a more difficult and maybe abstract bit of advice, but practice creativity within your tech. So if you know how to use tech well, you can find the first solution. So for example, it might just be that you know a tech really well, and you have an issue, and you try to marry those two things. It may be imperfect and probably shouldn't be rolled out immediately, but to find those sorts of solutions is always going to be a huge benefit for your users. And here on the report, I thought it'd be useful just to mention some of the responses we had when we asked charities how they're innovating. So people said they launched a dial-a-ride service to get local residents to their hospitals and GP appointments. People delivered teams with more cohesive, made teams more delivery teams more cohesive via technology, delivered more online resources and courses, collaborated on a virtual ward project, some social prescribing, integrating AI into service delivery from the start. And one charity built a bespoke and customized live streaming workflow that can be entirely controlled by an iPad or eye tracking PC. So just a handful of great ideas from the sector at large. So digital inclusion, I said we'd mentioned this, and it is a bit of advice that we're always going to be as aware of as possible. But embracing tech will not always be the most effective option for your users. To use probably the most common example, if a service user does not own or feel confident using a laptop, they will not be able to attend video calls from home. Expecting them to do so can be alienating and make services less effective. There is no single approach to ensuring digital inclusion, but you can start by talking to your service users, as we've mentioned several times, and will continue to mention. If users do not want to use digital, it's best to keep non-digital options open to them. Others may not, or alternatively, try and teach them or provide them the skills if that's the path they want to go down. Others may want to use digital but require skills training, accessibility support, or the necessary equipment to do so. There's plenty of great charities that can help here if that's a route you want to pursue. Good Things Foundation, the Digital Poverty Alliance, and Ability Net can all help you in the case you want to ensure users can use digital services. These are all charities. We'll put them in the chat or we'll send them in the email, but they're all charities that we worked with and really enjoyed working with, and they were so open to sort of those conversations. So definitely check them out. Using digital tech can broadly improve efficiency. So as a whole, digital can make your operations more efficient, thereby ensuring more time and resources and go to the things that matters, such as service delivery. Over the past year, using data to make operations more efficient was a priority for 48% of charities, according to the Charity Digital Skills Report. There are plenty of examples of how to do this, some of which you're probably doing already. Measuring the impact of your services via data analysis ensures, for example, resources are spent in the right area and yield the best possible results for service users. Instant messaging and video calling on platforms like Teams and Zoom, which is what we're doing right now, supports efficiency by enabling quick communication. A shared intranet or a wiki can contain information and allow you to do common tasks and processes without friction or silos. And charities can improve the efficiency of their operation through broad automation, reducing the amount of time spent on admin and manual processes internally. Automating boring tasks is a great use of AI, and it's the one that I suggest most often. The more tedious the task you automate, the more time you can spend on meaningful work. So that could be stuff like summaries of summarizing documents. Always go with the low risk and tedious tasks. Find the most tedious task you know. If it's low risk, it's probably right for automation. To move on to strategy. So all of the above does kind of depend on a strategy, and we always suggest that people pursue that. Our 2024 digital inclusion report found that less than 2/5 of charities actually have a digital strategy in place. Writing a digital strategy is an important opportunity to make sure that digital is working for your charity and that it's helping you to maximize your impact and improve your services. It allows you to actually address where these changes might be made, and you can get your users to massively inform your digital strategy. That is the ideal situation. Because of the scale of the digital world and the sheer number of products and services available and some of the marketing hype surrounding them, see AI again, it's important to gain focus and identify your digital priorities. The world is really noisy around tech. That's one thing that we try to do as much as possible, is to demystify. But if you follow every trend, you're going to adopt the wrong tech, and that's going to cause you problems. For all the opportunities of digital, there are potential risks and harms involved, and you need to be aware of those. And the digital strategy allows you to mitigate them. So charities can safeguard users by staying on top of cybersecurity and GDPR, to mention two obvious examples, as well as being aware of other digital risks to privacy and safety in relation to your services. Strategy relates to everything we've mentioned above, and it helps you plan for effectiveness, build on feedback, boost efficiency, safeguard users, and prepare for the future. It is essential. And we are running a digital strategy accelerator in the future, so keep an eye out for that, which will help charities on a learning management platform basically go through and create their own digital strategy with everything in mind. There's a lot that goes into digital strategy, a lot more than I can cover here. I think we have an old webinar on it. I think I might have delivered it, but yeah, it's really useful to read up on it, and we'll share I have an article that I wrote, quite a long one, about the steps you can take. So looking now to the future a little bit, we're going to cover some of the key areas for charities in 2026. The first area we want to cover is user-led services. So it says user-led there, but it's user-led services. This is about involving service users in the decisions, as we mentioned several times, and processes that impact them to make sure services are effective. User-led services are a way of tackling paternalism. Paternalism is an attitude or policy that overrides one person's wish in pursuit of their best paternalism is an attitude or policy that overrides a person's own wishes in pursuit of their best interests. It often involves a group or a person or a group of people assuming authority over other people and making decisions for them that, well-intentioned or not, prevents them from having autonomy in their own lives. It goes all the way back to the power dynamics formed in the colonial origins of charity work. Paternalistic approaches to service delivery create the environment that allows for abuses of power. They can mean that people experiencing inequality or marginalization continue to do so through the systems charities use to operate. Rather than give service users autonomy over the charity's work and how it's represented, charities can often make these decisions and these key decisions themselves. This links back to the fact that because services are funded by third parties rather than service users themselves, or usually, the focus of charities can go to the requirements of who is paying as opposed to the needs and aspirations of those meant to benefit. I think it's a tricky area, one that we all will have some basic understanding of, but it once again reiterates and reaffirms the need for feedback to talk to your service users and make sure that they have those channels in which they can feed into you. Some argue that the harder it is to collect feedback from service users, the more likely it is to be valuable, because it is in these instances where the intended beneficiaries are especially lacking a voice. So, as we covered earlier, charities should aim to create user-led services through co-production, co-design, and, of course, using beneficiary feedback mechanisms, or BFMs. The next area to tackle is systems change. Sorry, I'm just going to take a drink of water. So, some charities provide invaluable help on the individual or community level, while others are working on national or international scales. Some are working to prevent the causes of the problem, and others are tackling the impacts of the same problem. For charities, system change is about zooming out and seeing what is possible, where it's possible to intervene to stop vicious cycles and dysfunctions in systems that are causing problems that we seek to tackle. It's taking a wider lens approach to service delivery. So a good example is where two charities are basically working on the same issues, just from different angles. Someone's working on the root causes of the problem, and someone's dealing with the symptoms of the problem. That's where you push for collaboration to basically change the system itself. And those two people coming together, those two organizations coming together, can often find solutions which take account of a much wider issue. So interventions involve people collaborating rather than working in silos, and the ultimate idea is to come out with a new outcome. In 2026, it's key for charities to embrace new approaches to solve the problem that their service users experience. And ideally, such approaches will incorporate an ambition for systems change. And the final area, I think I'm a bit ahead of time, but there we go, is values. So it goes back to what we said at the beginning. Charities often uphold the values of a society through their work with their communities. Charities are expected to meet high standards of ethics and responsibility as aligned with their vision of the future. And many charities are deeply committed to specific values which guide how they interact with their communities and work behind the scenes. But when charities are forced into survival mode, as often happened, and as we've seen over the past few decades, it can often test the values of an organization. We're seeing that on a geopolitical scale now. We're seeing charities change their routes, and businesses are doing it even more so, because they're being tested on these in terms of the economy and so on. That's why in 2026 it's more important than ever, that charities look at how they are putting their values into practice so they can lead the way with clarity and integrity, constantly ensuring the fair and just treatment of service users. So that's it, a little bit early, 35 minutes rather than 33, rather than 40, but I can take some questions. And yeah, if you have any questions on anything at all, please just ask away, and we can discuss them. And as I said earlier, if people can respond in the chat, that would be great too, because I'm sure you have far more answers collectively. Let's start. I'm just going to have another sip of water, sorry. So, and one more reminder to upvote any questions that you see on the screen, and I'll get to those ones. So Caroline Benton, I went to the UK charity camp a few weeks ago, and we had some really interesting chats about the evolution of charity websites. Lots of people are saying that these are becoming less and less about service users and more about attracting and convincing of potential funders to give. I would be really interested to hear your thoughts on this. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. It's a great question. I think a few things. One, I spoke to funders the other day. I did some user research around funding. I won't say who, but we did some funding basically to think about how the code of practice, which many of you will know, might be useful as like a badge or something like that. And when talking to some funders, they basically said that they didn't look for anything other. A lot of them didn't look at anything other than the website. So a website was kind of like the window shopping for a charity. So a funder would go, oh, okay, I like that application or whatever, let's check their website. If their website looked good, even if it was meeting that bare minimum, they were quite happy to proceed. So I think it's important to have your website up to date for that reason. But I also think in terms of the question, I don't, it's becoming less important in some way because of AI and the changes in terms of search engine optimization and how actually fewer service users are landing on websites. Is something we're seeing, something we have to adapt to at Charity Digital, for example, and loads of charities across the world are going to have to adapt to that. No one really knows how to do that. So people know that the basic principles that guided SEO, search engine optimization, that put you at the top of Google so that people saw your website, still play out broadly in terms of AI, or what they call like generative engine optimization now. So basically writing articles or creating content that you hope ends up in an AI, in ChatGPT or whatever. But I think ultimately that's a shift that we're seeing, that people are caring maybe less because less people are getting onto their site. But yeah, certainly I think that when I go to websites as well, I'd say I find them less interesting. They don't always seem to be geared towards the service users. They seem to be geared towards any visitor. And maybe that's something to do with funders. I don't know. Certainly is something we've considered when we're looking for funding, but maybe that's because we knew our website was at a level that was okay. But I would say that I do think websites need to change. So, for example, a lot of written content, a lot of video content, a lot we see in podcasts and stuff like that. But what might need to change is stuff like I'm seeing learning management platforms that I mentioned earlier. So, that, like LinkedIn Learning, for example, but maybe a little bit neater and a little bit more specific to the needs of charities. Those are really good ways of actually super engaging your service users and getting them to maybe build some skills and stuff like that. If that was obviously the mission of your charity. So I think that could be a really useful way of changing. I don't know if that answered the question, and I know there was quite a lot in there, but I hope something changed there. In terms of website changing, there's so much going on right now, and AI is primarily the reason that people are shifting around. And the honest truth is, I don't think many people know exactly how it's going to look in a year's time, and they're responding with that level of uncertainty. So next question is from an anonymous attendee. How can we make our website more accessible for service users? So there's the WWW3, I think, guidelines, and someone else might be able to put that in the chat. But yeah, that's one way of doing it, just making sure that you follow those. There are really easy ways of doing this, like just off the bat, like color palettes and stuff like that, making sure that's all accessible. And always making sure stuff like this, any outward comms you have and stuff like that, there is options. There's a controversy or sort of a debate around these accessibility toolbars. Charity Digital has one, so you can go and check it out. On our left-hand side, you'll see a little toolbar. Yeah, thank you to the person in the back. Ability Net, yes, Natasha, you're right too. Charity Digital does have a toolbar, but there is some conversations I've seen recently where people are suggesting actually those can be a little unhelpful. It's Recite Me is the one we use, but we find it has been helpful to our service users. It's given them better access in one fell swoop. But ultimately, in an ideal world, websites would just be built with perfect accessibility and so on and so forth. So yeah, look at those guidelines as a standard and then speak to other people. I think, like I said, we spoke to AbilityNet during our digital inclusion campaign, and they were always so helpful. I'm sure they would be far more helpful than I can be. On top of that, we will, I hope my colleague is noting some of this down because I'm certainly not, but we will publish some, we will send you some guidelines that we've written up because we do have that ourselves. But it is a really good question because it's something we have struggled with ourselves and we're trying to improve. Again, Natasha, thank you so much. Web AIM is great too. So great there. Back to Caroline. And a sort of to add to the first question, I would be really interested in hearing about successful funding bids for specifically digital software for the development of development of service, please. Right. Now, so I think two things. One, infrastructure charities like Charity Digital and other tech infrastructure charities famously, and maybe we're just complaining, but we really struggle to get funding for tech. So it's quite interesting. What I think doesn't struggle to get funding for tech is if you can really show on the ground service delivery with digital. I actually think it's kind of appealing to funders. Because ultimately tech's going to do some things that funders want done. For example, they want to extend reach. They want to reach more people. They often want to, particularly with restricted funds, as mentioned, I feel like I'm seeing more and more of those. And that's the sort of message I'm getting from grant funders too, and from people who know this stuff. If there's more restrictions, the restrictions often mean stuff like we want to hit this number of people, we want to go to this area, this wider area. And that means that if you do use digital, you can often justify those numbers. You can often get to more people. And that's what digital's for. It's one of the benefits of it. So what I would say is always focus on the human element when in grant funding. But if you have a digital area, or you have a solution, a digital solution to a human issue, I think then you would appeal more to funders. I'm not a grant funding expert, but I do think that's basically what I've been having a lot of conversations with grant funders. They always want to know the human. They always want to know the sort of emotive elements. So keep those in there, but also see tech as a way of extending that solution. I hope that was helpful. Caroline, we had a free and very helpful website review. Few and far. Thank you, Caroline, for the link. That's super useful. Next is anonymous attendee again. They've asked the next 3 questions. I'm assuming it's more than one person. Does anyone have any recommendations for online resource hubs for service users to access videos, audios, blogs, etc.? Are they housed on websites? So, okay. Are they housed on websites, separate purchase built platforms? What works well? So I'm going to presume, okay. So firstly, Charity Digital does have a resource hub for service users. It's called Reimagining Services, and my colleague May post it in the chat now. I'm asking a lot of her. But in terms of actual websites, this is a really good question because I think other people might answer it better than I, because my experience in the charity sector is often seeing these resource hubs that provide loads of information to other charities and sort of. But if anyone has an example of a resource hub for a service user specifically that they like, I'd love it if they published in there. Otherwise, none is coming to mind specifically, but I would have answered this, and I will make a note to myself now that I will somehow send that round. But I could, yeah, definitely drum up an article on some of the best. This is a good idea. Thanks for helping me with my commissioning. I'm gonna drum up we'll put an article together for that one. And we'll publish it maybe next week. But it'll be some of the service. I really think it's a great question, but some of the examples of basically charities that are doing a really good job with service users on their website. I think that's what you're asking. And I don't have an answer off the top of my head, but I will get one for you in a week. So just stay tuned to the Charity Digital website, I suppose. Next question. How can we be sure that digital is actually making our services more efficient? I sometimes wonder it's a false economy from Anonymous. I think this is a super good question and one that I spoke to someone about yesterday. One of the issues we face as a digital focused charity is that we reach all these people and we have these really great sort of numbers of engagement. You know, like we have 1 million people visit our website a year or something like that. It's roughly that, but we'll tell that our trustees that, and they might turn around and go, okay, but what are they doing on your website? And I think this is one of the issues that digital often faces, that actually impact reporting is a massive problem around digital in a way that it's probably not in one-on-one. And I think that's because of an assumption, and a fair one, where if you're talking to someone or you're helping them one-on-one in person, you know you're having an impact. It's considered an impact. I don't think many people wouldn't. But if a person reads your article, it's that impact is less clear. There are places like Plinch, I think, is an interesting one. They do stuff on impact reporting. There is a Charity Digital article called 6 Impacts Report to Help You, which does touch on how to basically convey digital impact. And there's loads of third parties that will actually try and find deeper sort of responses, more qualitative responses about how digital has sort of helped people. Now, the one way we do it internally is actually just doing what I've mentioned several times and happy to come back to is forms. So beneficiary feedback mechanisms. So we basically do user research ourselves on Microsoft Forms. I can't recommend it enough for people who don't do it. Thank you to Ange for publishing those. People who don't do it, if you go on Microsoft Forms, you can create a simple survey and you can ask the service users whether this digital whatever solution helped, and they will essentially provide their feedback. You should probably make it a bit more elegant than that, but that's a quite easy, sufficient, and way to respond, I think. And it gives you the information you want. There is third parties that can probably give more elegant solutions, but as a starting point, I'd probably do that. Yes, Tasha, I will. We are a 4-year-old charity looking to expand our service delivery online and offer a variety of levels of intervention. Feedback from our service use practitioners who deliver our services. Bro, all right, yeah, this is all going into the article, so I will. We're going to write that internally. We'll do someone next week. We have a gap in our content calendar, so this has worked out very well for us as well. Thank you very much. 2 more questions, and feel free to ask any more if you have any. I'm going to go to Caroline because this is on the resource hub, and that's sort of where we are. We have been using your membership. So Caroline says she's been using your membership and Nucleus Learning, but haven't been particularly happy. So I'm now building our own on a Wix site. Okay, so Nucleus Learning, I'm presuming, I think it's a learning management platform. And it does go back to, we have been using Litmos, which we're happy with. I don't know how the pricing mechanisms might differ, and of course it comes with a cost, but Litmos is actually a pretty, just from our perspective, it's been a pretty good learning management system. Now, what would be maybe useful for service users is if you have something you want to teach them or help them out with, and you don't have immediate resource, it's a 24/7 learning platform that can take them through those journeys. So if that's relevant to your service delivery, I don't know, obviously, what everyone's doing, but that might be useful. And yeah, Litmos, I can actually say, so far, so good. Anonymous attendee, and this is the last question, but again, please feel free to add some. We have 13 more minutes. Thank you to the production person again. Where should we be prioritizing our focus digitally if our websites are no longer going to be? Oh, that's a very good question and a frustrating one. I mean, the simple fact is I'm head of content here and I'm struggling, not in myself, in my work. But what I mean is I'm struggling to think about the best way for us, or whether we need to pivot, because we just don't know what AI is going to look like. So here's some things we do know. We know that websites have gone down up to 50% for some big places. Places I think off the top of my head, like Business Insider, the Daily Mail. These are obviously news websites, but people are searching more and more on ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot, or whatever people are using, rather than going on the search engines, which are leading them to you. Now, if you've used any of those platforms, you'll know they often do link to you, but they already provide the information the person wanted, so it's not leading them to you. Whereas before, you were asking keywords in Google or Bing or whatever, and it was taking you to a website that would provide the answer. Now the answer is provided for you, so that the onward journey just often isn't necessary. Are we kind of getting about 5% of our incoming traffic now is coming through ChatGPT, less than 5% through Copilot and Gemini, just because I don't think they're as popular. But it is all a very different. We're still overwhelmingly Google, and to a lesser extent Bing, but at the same time it is shifting. Now, what that means is it will mean a reduction in your content in terms of people visiting your site. Now, one way of countering that is trying to get onto those AIs, and that is what they're calling, I think, generative engine optimization. That's a solution or a pivot from SEO. It hasn't happened in full yet or anywhere close to that, but it's where people might be leading. But the problem is I can't really supply an answer because I'm not entirely sure that's going to happen, or that wide shift might not be pulled back. It depends on a million different questions. But I suppose what you could do in the short term, at least, and sorry if this is a bit inconclusive, but I would maybe pivot your towards marketing. I mean, if it was me, I know, for example, the email marketing seems to still be doing the same job as before, and it's driving people to your site. We know that social media, I don't really like suggesting that people go to particular social media sites, because I think that we probably as a sector shouldn't go, that's my opinion, but shouldn't go to certain social media sites. But if you find the nicer social media sites, that's still a way of driving people, and it's still a way of meeting your service users. So you need to be on the places where they are, which is hard to find out. But again, the beneficiary feedback mechanism might help there. So yeah, I'd say go back to old forms of marketing, embrace the old forms of marketing, at least in the time being, and see how things play out. The biggest advice I give to anyone who is front page or dealing with their websites is you've got to keep up with everything. Read the legislation that's being passed and see what it might impact, because the way that your success will depend on the movement of the economy and the way that things are changing in society. My hope is that and again, this is a personal perspective, but my hope is that we have more robust measures that tackle misinformation, and thus the website might become once again a source of truth if you are helping people and you're giving them the right and accurate information. But I don't have much confidence in that, unfortunately. How come? So sorry if that was. I hope that was somewhat helpful at least. Anonymous attendee has asked another question. How can we measure digital exclusion among our service users, e.g., if they can't access online forms? Well, I mean, you will have some access to you'll basically have to pivot to whatever is available. And this is essential because I mentioned it earlier. I mean, the digital inclusion campaign taught us how naive we were in many ways, and we're always presuming everyone should go to tech and all charities should use tech. And as I said, we're actually pretty critical of tech and its shortcomings and kind of aware and happy to have those conversations. But yeah, if your service users aren't online, think about the way that you're currently interacting with them and communicating with them, and then pivot and make sure that those are the forms that you're using for feedback, because those are the way that they're sort of proven roads that you've already trod. So I would pivot to that. And then, at those stages, digital inclusion is something you can build. And so by offering the training, and if they're interested in the training, again, don't push anyone towards it. But if the training's interested, if you have the ability, and I know few charities do, but to provide them with the tech that allows them to access your services, or talk to one of those people like Good Things Foundation and the Digital Poverty Alliance, who might be able to provide you with more information there and maybe even some tech. There are loads of charities that do offer great, like charity Computers for Charity is one we work with. They offer massively reduced tech, always used and refurbished, which is good for the environment. So good for our 2023 campaign, and it boosts digital inclusion, which is good for our 2024 campaign, and provides more services, which is good for the current campaign. So yeah, there's loads of ways of doing it, and it's just about finding the most effective and useful way for your charity. And that is all the questions, unless anyone has any others. I will commission that article on the service users and the best sort of models and the best ways of doing that. So thank you for those questions. And yeah, thanks so much for all your time today. Our next webinar, just to mention, is on AI for nonprofits. It's transforming financial management in an era of uncertainty. And that's on the 11th of December. So I think 2 weeks from now at 1 p.m. We hope to see you all soon and see you all then. And yeah, please, if you're interested in more in-depth training, we have lots of academies and masterclasses, and we have loads of free webinars coming up, and they look at AI, service delivery, finance, fundraising, and so much more. And my email, if you want it, is ioanmarc.jones@charitydigital.org.uk. It should be on the website. If anyone has any further questions, I hope I've been moderately helpful. Please just get in touch. And yeah, thanks so much. And there's my email if you want it. Very on it.